The vastness of space is nothing like the void it feels like to be stranded in it. For the crew of the Ellerim, an alien warship, space had become a haunting expanse, stretching out before them, endless and unforgiving. Once a mighty vessel, now it was a shadow of its former glory. Its powerful engines had failed, the life support systems sputtered, and the artificial gravity had been sporadic at best. The aliens aboard, beings of great intellect and advanced technology, had tried everything to fix the ship. They had sent out distress signals to multiple species in the galaxy, hoping for a solution. Yet they received no response. Their efforts had become increasingly futile. The Ellerim had been their pride, a symbol of their civilization's strength. Now it was their prison. With each passing day, they grew weaker. Their food supply was running low, their water purifier malfunctioning, and every repair attempt felt like a desperate grab at the impossible. The ship's captain, an alien named Xerath, stood alone on the command deck, staring out into the emptiness of space. His once gleaming uniform was now stained with the grime of endless work. His crew, once a symbol of hope and pride, were now mere shadows of themselves. They had never faced such a crisis. Their technology was advanced, more advanced than most other races in the galaxy, but even the Ellerim's cutting-edge systems couldn't save them. Xerath had grown tired of hearing the same empty assurances from his engineers. "We'll figure it out," they would say. "There's still time," they promised. But the truth was, they were all out of time. The Ellerim was dying, and so too, it seemed, were they. With every passing hour, they were inching closer to their end. Xerath could feel the despair growing in his chest. It was hard to deny it any longer. The Ellerim would never be the same. Their last hope, a desperate plea sent to the distant reaches of space, hung in the air. They had reached out to a far-off human colony. He had heard stories about these humans. They were young, unrefined compared to the ancient civilizations of the galaxy, but they had something others did not: resilience. Humans were known to solve problems in ways that no one expected. If anyone could fix the Ellerim, it was them. The crew of the Ellerim waited, their bodies weakening by the day. The message had been sent out days ago, but there was still no response. They could only wait in silence, hoping for a miracle. Xerath paced the command deck, his mind racing. What if they were too late? What if the humans didn't respond at all? The ship groaned as it drifted further into the cold silence of space. Each sound, every vibration, reminded them of the time slipping away. Then, as if answering his desperate thoughts, a faint signal appeared on the ship's radar. A human warship, small in comparison to the Ellerim, had arrived. The Vigilant, a sleek, cutting-edge vessel, its hull gleaming with the brightness of a new dawn, moved towards them. Xerath's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't much, but it was their only hope. As the Vigilant docked with the Ellerim, Xerath stood with his officers at the ready, watching the strange humans step aboard. They were an odd sight, so different from his own crew, yet there was something unmistakably familiar about them. A kind of quiet confidence that made Xerath feel both uneasy and hopeful. The human commander, Captain Erica Shaw, stepped forward, her uniform simple yet precise. Her face was serious, but there was no sign of fear. "We've received your distress call. Let's get to work," she said in a voice that was calm but firm. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of the task ahead. Xerath led her to the ship's engineering section, where his best minds were working tirelessly to solve the problem. But when Shaw saw the damage up close, even her confident demeanor faltered. The Ellerim was in worse shape than anyone had expected. The systems were failing, yes, but something else was wrong. Something no one could identify. The power core's malfunctioning. The life support is shutting down. Your navigation system's fried, Shaw said, inspecting the ship's control systems. But there's something else. Something strange. She turned to Xerath, her eyes narrowing. This isn't just mechanical failure. It feels like someone, or something, has been sabotaging the ship from the inside. Xerath's blood ran cold. He hadn't considered that. But now that the humans had pointed it out, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were right. The Ellerim's problems weren't just technical. There was something more, something that had been gnawing at the ship's systems for far longer than they had realized. Shaw didn't waste time with hesitation. She called in her engineers and ordered a complete system check. The humans worked quickly, their methods different from the aliens in ways that were hard to describe. The Ellerim's engineers had tried logic, reason, and precision. The humans, however, approached the problem differently. They threw away the rules and began thinking outside the box. While the aliens focused on fixing individual systems, Shaw instructed her crew to focus on the entire ship as one, a living, breathing entity, rather than a collection of broken parts. It wasn't long before the first breakthrough came. One of Shaw's engineers, a young man named James, suggested something that made Xerath's alien engineers shake their heads in disbelief. What if the ship's systems are responding to emotional energy? James asked, his voice uncertain but filled with quiet excitement. Xerath wasn't sure if he understood. The Ellerim systems were based on pure logic. There was no place for emotions in a machine. But Shaw's face lit up. That's it. The ship is alive in ways we don't understand. Maybe it's trying to communicate with us, but only in a way that humans can understand. It was a bizarre thought, but the more Xerath thought about it, the more it made sense. The Ellerim systems had always been intuitive, adaptive. It wasn't just technology. It was something more. It was as if the ship had a soul, one that could be reached only through the humanity of the crew that had come to help. Shaw's crew worked around the clock, using their unique human perspective to unlock the ship's deepest secrets. Slowly but surely, they began to bring the Ellerim back to life. But the ship had a final secret, something that no one expected. As the ship's core was repaired, a terrible rumble shook the vessel. The crew scrambled to hold onto anything they could. A voice, faint but clear, echoed through the corridors of the Ellerim. It was not human. It was not alien. It was something else, something trapped inside the ship for centuries, feeding on its suffering. Xerath's heart sank as he realized the truth. The ship's malfunction wasn't an accident. It had been sabotaged by a malevolent force that had taken control of its core, feeding off the pain of the crew. It had almost won. But the humans, with their determination and unpredictable ingenuity, had saved the Ellerim. They had fixed what was broken, not just the ship, but the hope that had almost been lost. As the ship's systems hummed back to life, Xerath realized something he never thought possible. The humans were the key. They weren't just another race in the galaxy. They were the ones who could fix what was broken. The Ellerim would survive, and so would its crew, thanks to the humans who had come to their aid. Captain Erica Shaw stood on the bridge of the Vigilant, staring at the view of the dark abyss outside. The hum of the warship's engines was steady, comforting in its regularity. The mission had seemed simple enough. Respond to a distress signal from the alien ship Ellerim, which had gone silent after a massive technical failure. The humans had been in space long enough to know that sometimes things went wrong. But this was different. There was something in the tone of the alien message that made Shaw uneasy, a sense of desperation that none of her previous missions had ever stirred in her. Still, she pushed the feeling aside. They were here to help. They would fix whatever was broken and move on. The silence of space was broken by the crackling sound of the comm system. "Captain Shaw, we're entering the vicinity of the Ellerim." The voice of her first officer, Lieutenant Harris, echoed from the intercom. "We should be able to make contact soon." Erica nodded, her hands resting lightly on the console. She had led her crew through many missions, but this one felt different. The distance between them and the alien ship seemed to stretch out, like an invisible force pulling them further away. Yet the need to act was clear. The Vigilant had been sent to help, but what awaited them wasn't something they could have prepared for. Moments later, The massive shape of the Ellerim appeared on the radar, its once pristine hull now marred by damage and neglect. It was hard to believe that such a sophisticated vessel had fallen so far. The ship was adrift, its lights flickering intermittently, casting a ghostly glow through the dark void of space. As they drew closer, the enormity of the situation began to sink in. The Ellerim was not just broken, it was on the brink of death. Shaw could feel the weight of her responsibility pressing on her chest. She had been trained to handle disasters, but nothing had ever felt as urgent as this. "Let's make contact," Shaw ordered, her voice firm but betraying a hint of the unease she felt. A response came quickly, a voice not from the Ellerim, but from the ship's automated systems. "Warning," the cold, mechanical voice echoed through the comms. "Life support systems are failing. Immediate assistance required." The message was stark, unemotional, just facts. Shaw wasn't surprised. The Ellerim's crew must be exhausted, their resources nearly gone. But as she glanced at the crew around her, Shaw knew that the true challenge hadn't even begun. "Prepare to dock," she said, her eyes scanning the control panels as the Vigilant aligned itself with the Ellerim. The silence in the command center was deafening, the crew aware that their next steps could be crucial. They moved swiftly, no time to waste. The docking process felt slow, too slow. Shaw's heart raced as she watched the seconds tick by. Finally, with a soft thud, the ships were connected. A hiss of air greeted them as the airlock sealed. Shaw led her team into the dark, lifeless corridors of the Ellerim, the silence palpable. The ship had once been a beacon of technological marvel, but now it felt like a tomb. Shaw's footsteps echoed off the walls as she moved forward, her flashlight sweeping across the hallway. Strange, flickering lights cast long shadows in every corner. The eerie feeling intensified with each step. She had expected a crisis, but this felt like something more. "Captain," Lieutenant Harris called out, his voice barely above a whisper. "I found something you should see." Shaw moved swiftly towards him, her boots clanging against the metal floor. He was standing in front of one of the Ellerim's command consoles, staring at the screen in front of him, his face pale. The data on the screen didn't make sense. The system readouts showed signs of damage, but there was something else. An unknown code, something that didn't belong. The ship's systems were being affected by something beyond a mechanical failure. It was almost as if they were being manipulated. Who could have done this? Shaw muttered under her breath. Her mind raced as she tried to piece together the puzzle. The aliens had been a peaceful race, their technology advanced but not aggressive. Yet the evidence on the screen told a different story. This wasn't an accident. The ship had been tampered with, intentionally damaged. But by whom? And why? As Shaw stood there, the ship's lights flickered once more, then went out entirely. The darkened corridor felt even more oppressive now. Shaw felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up as an unsettling thought crossed her mind. What if this was no accident? What if someone had led them here? A sudden sound broke the silence, a low mechanical hum coming from deep within the ship. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it sent a chill down Shaw's spine. The crew remained still, listening intently. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the walls. It wasn't the sound of a damaged system. It was the sound of something alive, something working from within the ship itself. Shaw's heart raced as she realized the truth. The Ellerim wasn't just broken. Something had infected it. Something alien. The crew couldn't just fix the ship. They had to find what was causing this disturbance before it was too late. "Everyone, move out," Shaw ordered, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "We need to find the source of that sound, now." The crew scattered, their flashlights cutting through the thick darkness as they made their way deeper into the heart of the ship. Shaw led the way, her hand gripping her weapon tightly, unsure of what they might encounter next. The deeper they ventured into the Ellerim, the more the feeling of unease intensified. The ship seemed to be alive with an energy that Shaw couldn't explain. It wasn't just malfunctioning. It was reacting to them. Every step they took felt like an intrusion, the ship growing more hostile by the second. Shaw's instincts screamed that they were not alone. Something was watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. Finally, they reached the core of the ship, the source of the humming sound. As Shaw and her crew stood before the massive, glowing engine, a chilling realization washed over her. The Ellerim had been infected by something far worse than a simple malfunction. This was no mechanical failure. It was as if the ship itself had become a living creature, and the force inside it was something malevolent, feeding off the ship's energy. Something ancient. Before Shaw could react, the lights flickered again, and a voice, low and distorted, filled the air. "You should not have come here," it whispered. The words sent a jolt of fear through the crew. The ship wasn't just malfunctioning. It was alive, and it was trying to drive them away. But Shaw wasn't one to back down. They had come to help, and she wasn't about to leave until they fixed what was broken. "Stay close," she said, her voice firm, but her mind racing. "We can still save this ship." They had to, because if they didn't, whatever was inside the Ellerim would be unleashed on the galaxy. The ship drifted through the black void of space, its engines humming with quiet power. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Commander Sarah Daniels stood before the large viewport, watching as distant stars glimmered faintly in the distance. The stellar horizon had been sent on a routine mission to investigate an unknown signal deep in uncharted space. What should have been a simple task was beginning to feel anything but. The signal had led them to an abandoned research station, a place that seemed forgotten by time itself. The ship had landed, but now there was no sign of life. The comms were silent, the station's systems barely functioning. Something was wrong. Sarah could feel it in her bones. She turned away from the window, her mind racing with possibilities. The crew was ready for anything. She'd made sure of that. But the strange feeling in the pit of her stomach couldn't be shaken. They had expected a routine rescue, a few repairs. But what they had found was a ghost ship, it tall, silent, and cold. No bodies, no signs of a struggle, just emptiness. "Commander," came the voice of Lieutenant Marcos, his tone uneasy. "We've scanned the station. There's no life on board, but there's a faint signal coming from the central command room. It's almost like it's alive, but there's no pattern to it. It's erratic." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, erratic?" she asked, her voice tight. "It's like a heartbeat," Marcos continued, his voice lowering as though he didn't want to say the words aloud. "But it's not human. It's different. Something's pulsing through the system." Sarah turned quickly, her thoughts spinning. "Are you telling me the station's systems are reacting to something, or to someone?" He didn't answer immediately. The uncertainty in his silence was enough. "Yes, Commander. It's as though something inside the station is alive. Stay sharp, everyone," Sarah commanded, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "We move out in 5 minutes." The crew assembled in the docking bay, each one equipped with their standard gear, armor, weapons, and their comms packs. They were ready, but as Sarah led the team through the station's airlock, she could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. The station's metal walls were rusted, its lights flickering intermittently. It felt abandoned, empty. But the pulse, the signal, was still there, faint but persistent. "Keep your eyes open," Sarah instructed, her voice echoing in the darkened hallway. She led the way, the rest of the crew falling in behind her. Their footsteps echoed in the empty halls as they moved through the station, each corner feeling darker than the last. The silence around them seemed oppressive, unnatural. After several minutes, they reached the central command room, a vast chamber filled with broken consoles and screens. It was cold in here, colder than it should have been. The pulse, though faint, was stronger here. Sarah could feel it vibrating through the air, resonating in her chest. It was an odd sensation, almost like a heartbeat, but not quite. It wasn't human. Not at all. "Check the consoles," Sarah ordered. "Find the source of that signal." Lieutenant Marcos and Ensign Harris approached the main console, fingers flying over the cracked keys. The screens flickered, and for a moment, Sarah thought they might be able to pull something useful from the station's failing systems. But then the screen went black, and a chilling voice, distorted and barely recognizable, suddenly filled the room. "You shouldn't have come," the voice whispered, sending a shiver down Sarah's spine. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, as though it was woven into the very fabric of the station itself. The crew froze. A tense silence filled the room. "Who is that?" Sarah demanded, stepping closer to the console. But the voice didn't answer. It just repeated, "You shouldn't have come." The pulse grew louder, more insistent, filling the air with a strange hum. Sarah's instincts told her that this wasn't just a malfunction. This was something else, something that had taken control of the station, something that had awakened. "Commander," Marcos said, his voice trembling. "This station, it's not just abandoned. It's alive. The signal, it's coming from the heart of the station. It's like it's feeding off the systems, using them to communicate. But that's impossible, right? Stations don't do that." Sarah's mind raced. She had seen plenty of strange things in her career, but this was different. The pulse, the voice, the sense of something ancient and alive. It felt like the station itself was trying to warn them, or perhaps it was trying to trap them. She had no idea, but she wasn't about to let her crew fall victim to whatever this was. "Find the source of that signal now," she ordered, her voice hard as steel. "We need to know what's controlling this." The crew scrambled to work. It wasn't long before they found it. The source of the pulse, buried deep in the core of the station. It was a dark, twisting mass of cables and wires, a tangle of technology, and something far older, far more alien. It seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its tendrils extending from the central core, embedding themselves in every part of the station. The pulse was coming from it, and it wasn't just a signal, it was a warning. Sarah's stomach churned as she realized the truth. The station hadn't just been abandoned. It had been taken over by something that had merged with it, something that had turned the station into a living, breathing entity. The human research team that had been stationed here, they hadn't died from a malfunction or accident. They had become part of this thing. "Commander," Marcos called out, his voice full of panic. It's reaching out. It's trying to connect with us. It wants us to." Before he could finish, the pulse flared, and the lights went out completely. A cold, unnatural darkness swallowed them whole. Sarah's heart raced as she fumbled for her flashlight, but it was useless. The darkness was alive, suffocating, as though the station itself had become a predator, closing in on them. The voice came again, louder now. "You shouldn't have come," it whispered, but this time, there was no distortion. The voice was clear, human. Sarah's blood ran cold. And then, the truth hit her like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just the station that had merged with the alien entity. It was the humans who had been stationed here. They were now part of it, their minds and bodies consumed, twisted into something other. The pulse was their consciousness, reaching out to anyone who dared to enter. "We need to leave," Sarah whispered urgently, her voice hoarse. Now. But it was too late. The station had already begun to move. The walls closed in, the floor shifted beneath their feet. The stellar horizon was their only chance. But escaping wasn't going to be easy. The station wasn't going to let them go that easily. With every step they took, the station's pulse grew stronger. It was following them, watching them. And the truth was clear. If they didn't escape soon, they would become part of the station's consciousness, lost to the darkness forever. The Silver Star was drifting slowly through the outskirts of a vast nebula, its engines humming softly as the crew tried to make sense of the strange anomaly they had detected. Commander Liam Foster stood at the helm, eyes narrowed as he studied the flickering holographic displays. They had been on this mission for weeks, investigating an unusual energy signature that had been sending out distorted signals. At first, they had thought it was a simple malfunction, perhaps a mistake in their scanners. But now, as the energy pulses grew more erratic, it was clear that something was wrong. They were not alone in this sector of space. "Commander," Lieutenant Harris called out from the communications station, his voice tight with concern. "We're getting more interference. It's growing stronger. Whatever this is, it's not natural. It's like the energy field is alive, responding to our presence." Liam frowned, turning towards the station. "Alive," he echoed. "You're saying the signal's not a malfunction. It's more than that." Harris continued, fingers flying over his console as he tried to pinpoint the source. "It's like something is out there, watching us. And every time we get closer, the signal shifts. It adapts." Liam felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen strange things in his years of service. But this was different. It was as though the universe itself was responding to them, but not in a friendly way. "Keep tracking it," he ordered. "We need to know exactly where it's coming from." The crew went back to their work, scanning the area for any signs of the source of the signal. But the more they searched, the more unsettling things became. The interference was growing stronger, and the once calm and steady hum of the silver star was now joined by a low, almost imperceptible vibration beneath their feet. It wasn't the ship. It was something else, something in the space around them. "Commander," came the voice of Ensign Murphy, her tone strained. "We've found something. There's a vessel out there, hidden within the nebula. It's not showing up on any standard scans. It's as if it's cloaked." Liam's heart skipped a beat. A hidden ship. They had detected no signs of anything out there when they first arrived. And now, suddenly, there was something just beyond their reach, concealed in the very heart of the nebula. The thought that they were being stalked sent a wave of unease through him. "How do we know it's not just a ghost ship?" he asked, though he didn't truly believe it himself. A ghost ship would still show up on their scanners. "It's different," Murphy replied. "There's no energy signature, no heat, just a cold presence. And the signals, it's almost like the ship is sending them out, not us sending it." Liam's mind raced as he processed the information. It was becoming clear that this wasn't a normal mission. Something, or someone, was out there, and they had been drawing closer to it without even realizing it. He stood up, moving towards the command center. "All hands, prepare for a full scan. We need to get a visual confirmation on this vessel. And keep your eyes sharp. We don't know what we're dealing with." The crew moved quickly, each person falling into their role as the ship's systems came online. But as the scans began, the vibrations underfoot grew stronger, the humming noise intensifying. The silver star wasn't alone. The enemy ship, though cloaked, was closing in on them. The communication system crackled to life again, but this time it wasn't just static, it was a voice, low and distorted, like the static was trying to speak. The words were almost incomprehensible, but they were unmistakable. "Get out." A shiver ran through Liam as the voice repeated itself, growing louder. "Get out. Get out. Get out." It was a warning, but it didn't feel like a plea. It felt like a threat. "Lieutenant Harris," Liam said, his voice calm despite the rising tension. "Can you trace the signal?" "I'm trying, Commander, but the interference. It's like the ship's power is fluctuating with every pulse. I can't get a solid lock on it." Liam's eyes narrowed. It was becoming obvious now. This was no ordinary enemy. Something was manipulating the ship, warping the space around them, and hiding itself at the same time. They were being hunted. The voice crackled again, closer this time. "You shouldn't have come." Liam clenched his fists. The crew was on edge, glancing nervously at each other, unsure of what to do. There was a presence here, a malevolent force that had been waiting for them. They were in its domain now, and it was far from pleased. "Commander," Harris spoke up again, his voice filled with panic. "The cloaked ship, it's moving. Fast, too fast. It's like it's coming directly at us. We can't escape it." Liam stood motionless for a moment, considering their options. The Silver Star was a formidable ship, but no technology, no matter how advanced, could defend against an invisible enemy. And whatever this thing was, it had the upper hand. They were trapped in a strange, invisible web. Escape wasn't possible. "Full shields, all power to the engines," Liam commanded, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was futile. They were out of time. The force they were up against was unlike anything they had ever faced. Without warning, the ship jolted violently, throwing everyone off balance. The lights flickered, then went out completely. A cold silence descended upon them, only the faint hum of the ship's emergency systems keeping them tethered to reality. But even that was fading. Suddenly, the air was filled with a shrill, high-pitched sound, a frequency so sharp it felt like it was slicing through their minds. Liam grabbed his head, the pain unbearable. "Shut it off," he yelled. "I can't, Commander," Harris cried, his hands frantically moving over the controls. "The systems, they're not responding." The sound grew louder, more insistent. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. The presence, whatever it was, had disappeared, vanished into the depths of space. But Liam knew this wasn't over. He could feel it in his gut. They had only just begun to unravel the mystery of the unseen enemy. Whatever had stalked them in the nebula was still out there, waiting. And next time, it might not be as merciful. "Prepare for another scan," Liam said, his voice firm. "We're not leaving until we know exactly what's going on here. And we're not alone in this sector, not by a long shot." The Aurora drifted silently through the dark expanse of space, its once pristine hull now battered and scarred from weeks of relentless battle. The crew aboard, a mix of seasoned warriors and young recruits, could feel the weight of the coming storm. Their ship had become their home, their sanctuary, but it was now a dying relic, struggling to stay operational under the crushing assault of the enemy forces. The war had dragged on longer than anyone had anticipated, and with each passing day, their supplies dwindled, their morale eroded. But this wasn't just any fight. It was the final one, the last stand, humanity's ultimate test of survival. Commander Sarah Blake stood at the front of the bridge, her gaze fixed on the massive star ahead. It wasn't just a star, though. It was a symbol of everything that had been lost. The enemy fleet, the Syndar Empire, had devastated the human colonies, leaving nothing but ashes and broken dreams in their wake. And now they were coming for Earth, the last bastion of humanity's hope. The Syndar were ruthless, relentless, and they were determined to wipe humanity from the face of the galaxy. "Status report," Blake demanded, her voice steadied despite the tension that gnawed at her insides. She couldn't afford to show weakness, not now. Not with everything on the line. Lieutenant Marcus Reed, her trusted second-in-command, turned from his station, his face grim. "The enemy fleet is closing in. We estimate they'll arrive within the next 6 hours. Our long-range weapons are down, and we've only got a handful of fighters left. Shields are holding for now, but not for long. We're outgunned, outnumbered. We don't have much of a chance." Blake nodded, though her mind raced. The Aurora wasn't the strongest ship in the fleet, but it was one of the most capable. It had seen them through countless battles, and it would see them through this one too, even if it meant sacrificing everything. But the enemy wasn't just coming to destroy their ship. They were coming to destroy everything they had fought for, everything humanity had ever stood for. "We'll make it count," Blake said, turning to address the entire bridge crew. "Prepare for battle stations. Every man and woman aboard this ship is going to fight like their lives depend on it, because they do." As the crew scrambled to their positions, Blake's thoughts wandered to her crew members, her family in this cold, dark void. They had been through so much together. She remembered the faces of the young recruits who had joined them only months ago, eager and full of hope. She had promised them that they would see the end of the war, that they would survive this. But the reality was beginning to set in, and the weight of that promise was heavy on her shoulders. The Aurora's sensors blinked, drawing Blake's attention back to the task at hand. The enemy fleet was now in range. Hundreds of Syndar warships loomed ahead, their massive hulls glistening with deadly precision. The battle was about to begin, and there was no turning back now. "Enemy fleet has engaged," Reed called out, his voice laced with urgency. "They're firing." Blake's heart raced as the first volley of enemy fire lit up the void. The Aurora rocked violently as shields flared to life, absorbing the brunt of the attack. But it wasn't enough. The ship groaned, its metal frame creaking under the strain. Blake could feel the ship's bones aching, as if it too knew this was its final battle. "Return fire," Blake shouted. "All weapons, open fire." The Aurora's cannons roared to life, launching a barrage of energy blasts into the oncoming enemy. The sound of the ship's weapons echoed through the corridors, a strange comfort amidst the chaos. For a moment, Blake allowed herself to hope. Perhaps they could make it through this. Perhaps they could win. But deep down, she knew that the odds were stacked against them. The Syndar were too powerful, too numerous. The battle raged on, explosions rocking the ship as both sides exchanged fire. The Aurora's shields flickered under the constant barrage, and the damage reports came in fast and furious. One of the starboard engines had been hit, sending a cascade of sparks through the control panels. The lights flickered, and the hum of the ship's power systems began to falter. "Reinforcements?" Blake asked, though she already knew the answer. Reed shook his head, his face pale. "We're alone, Commander. The fleet was wiped out days ago. We're the last ones left." A cold silence settled over the bridge, the weight of those words sinking in. The last defense of humanity had come down to this. It was them, and only them. If they fell, it would be the end of everything. "We're not giving up," Blake said fiercely, her eyes burning with determination. "Not while we're still breathing. Prepare for close combat. Get the fighters in the air, and don't stop until we've taken down as many of them as we can." Her crew responded without hesitation, their faces set with the same resolve. They would fight, no matter the cost. The battle had turned into a deadly dance of survival, each side clawing for any advantage. The Syndar ships were massive, their weapons devastating, but humanity had something the Syndar didn't: a relentless will to survive. Minutes stretched into hours, and the Aurora continued to hold its ground. The fighters launched in waves, darting in and out of enemy fire, their guns blazing. Blake watched as one by one her crew fell. The first wave of enemy ships was decimated, but the second came even faster, more brutal. "Captain," Reed's voice cut through the chaos, "we can't keep this up much longer. The shields are down to 20%, and our weapons are failing." Blake's eyes locked onto the enemy fleet, her jaw set in a grim line. The Aurora was barely hanging on, but she wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. "We go down fighting," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This ship will be our final stand." And with that, Blake made the call. It was a desperate move, but it was the only option left. The Aurora's engines surged, charging straight toward the heart of the Syndar fleet. The ship groaned as it pushed forward, the final surge of power all they had left. The fighters followed, weaving in and out of the oncoming fire, launching their last barrage of missiles at the enemy. The moment of impact was deafening. The Aurora collided with one of the Syndar ships, a massive explosion rocking both vessels. Blake's vision blurred as the shockwave slammed through the ship. She could feel the ship's final breath, the ship and crew becoming one with the stars. When the smoke cleared, there was no sign of the Aurora. But as the enemy ships began to retreat, one thing was clear: humanity had made its final stand. They had fought until the end, and in that final act of defiance, they had given humanity a chance.